Thank you, James, and thanks to everyone who's joined. I've been in the chat and seeing all the lovely questions and comments come in, so thank you for participating. So my name is Allison Cavanaugh. I'm an enterprise sales executive at SalesLoft. I'm American, but I moved to the UK about 3.5 years ago. So like many of us, I kind of fell into a sales role. I graduated from marketing with a marketing degree from university and kind of thought I would go into marketing. But I took a job selling radio ads for an oldies radio station in Boston, which was not ideal. I was kind of driving around myself in my old crappy beat up car around Massachusetts trying to get small businesses to advertise on the radio. So you can imagine how fun that was. But from there, it led me to a really good opportunity at HubSpot, where I started my tech sales career. So I fell in love with B2B SaaS. The company was 300 employees when I started and around 800 when I left. So I moved from being a BDR to an AE there. From there, I moved to New York and worked at a startup and then a larger company where I was an account executive for many years, which then brought me to the UK. So I got the opportunity to move to London and open our EMEA office. From there, I moved to SalesLoft, and I'm now building out the enterprise function here. So I really wanted to join this event as a sort of career-long account executive. I'm really passionate about women in sales. I'm one of the only women on my team, and I've gotten so much value and learned so much from conversations with other women in sales and found it really inspiring. So I want to do whatever I can to promote and encourage more women to get into and stay within the profession.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. You've done a fantastic job pulling together many of the other panelists, so I appreciate your efforts so far. Wendy?
Yeah, so my name's Wendy Kilgannon. I am an enterprise account executive at Nudge. I, like Alison, and probably like many people on this call, also fell into sales entirely by accident. So my first sales job was actually when I was 13. I sold programs at a football stadium. And did not earn as much as Elaine did selling her t-shirts and things earlier. I earned 10 pence per program. It was commission only, and I usually made about £15 for a couple of hours work, which when you're 13 was probably quite a good thing. I did an English degree at university, wanted to be an English teacher. When I finished uni, got a job in sales as a short-term stopgap and discovered that I really loved it. So I've done a variety of roles in sales, from kind of desk-based telephone selling, BDR, kind of through to SMB and mid-market AE, and now enterprise AE at Nudge. And the reason I wanted to be on the panel today is I've been really lucky throughout my career to have some great female role models who've helped light the way for me and kind of carve that path ahead of me. And I think it's really important that we pass that baton on. So I've been lucky to have that for me, and I'd love to help do that for other people. So and I think today is part of that as well. It helps us reach a really wide audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. If we can demonstrate that there's wonderful leaders like yourselves out there that are willing to put themselves out there and express their learnings and what challenges they face, it should make it easier for others to take that route. And Elaine made a good point earlier that, you know, it doesn't matter what level of seniority you are, you can have a voice in an organization and start to promote the values of, you know, women in sales or women in leadership. So good points. Imma, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, I guess I always like to connect with people. I started very young when I was only 6 years old. I think I was the only 6-year-old who was devastated when there was summer break on because I wasn't able to, you know, hang out with my friends. And I always had that kind of like, yeah, it felt easy for me to connect with other people. So I kind of fell into the sales track. And to be honest, it was really the money in the beginning and the opportunity that there was in Dublin, because I'm originally from Munich. So I moved over to Dublin, and there was a massive opportunity for German speakers. I was like, this sounds interesting. Like, there's quite a bit of money to be made. But to be honest, what I learned throughout the years is, you know, aside from good paychecks, it's the culture and it's the people within the tech industry. Like they're really creators. They wanna, you know, they wanna drive impact. They wanna achieve something, and they wanna build something bigger than themselves, and they wanna leave something behind. And that's kind of the culture that you see in the tech industry. And now in my role in Salesforce, I have an opportunity to help young individuals through a graduate program transition into those SDR roles and create that path for them, so they can continue to drive that impact. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great. So first question, I'll start with Wendy. What challenges have you faced as a woman in your career, and how have you overcome them?
It's a really good question. And I think probably I'm my own biggest challenge. So like we sort of talked about before, and it's kind of come up quite a lot in the chat, is that imposter syndrome. I think I'm probably my own harshest critic, like most of us are, and I think that makes it really difficult sometimes because I don't believe in myself enough. But externally challenges, I think probably from a very personal perspective, I've had 2 maternity leaves in my career. So I've had in total 18 months out of the workforce. And that's kind of 18 months that peers who are the same age as me have been working. And I kind of overcame that, I guess, by working twice as hard afterwards, which isn't necessarily the best route to take. But I think it's important to recognise that biologically women do have to take time out after they have a child, but understanding how we can help transition them back into the workplace and support them through that, which I was very lucky to have that in both times. You know, understanding that is really important.
What would you I hope this is an appropriate question, but I was just wondering what advice you would have for future mums, you know, that are planning that. Is there advice they should be thinking about going into that stage of their life when they manage their career?
Yeah, I guess it's so understanding and recognizing the reality of the situation. So one of the biggest things for me, and it probably is with lots of salespeople, when you go on maternity leave, you spend a month before you're going on maternity leave handing over your pipeline. It's all this stuff that you've worked really hard on and you've got to hand it over. And then when you come back, no one gives anything back. You essentially are starting a new job. And I think it's important for people to understand the reality of that, both the individual, but also the company. Whilst someone is coming back to a job they know, they've got to start from the beginning again and rebuild up that pipeline and rebuild those relationships because they've had time out. And it's not a bad thing when they're off. Emma, I know you mentioned this as well when we were chatting before, but being a mum gives you, and being a parent generally gives you so many different skills. Just because you've had time out of the workplace doesn't mean it's unproductive time. So it's recognizing that change in skill set as well and understanding how that can be applied to your work. So I am now much more time efficient. I am ruthless with my time boxing because I have to be, because I had to be like that at home, and now I have to be like that to be able to manage that. I don't like the kind of work-life balance phrase because I don't think it's ever in balance for me. It's never kind of equal. I tend to look at it as work-life integration. How can I make the two fit together? And sometimes one demands more of me than the other, but that's okay. Like, as long as it's never one-sided, too one-sided for too long, that's fine.
Great. So on the question of challenges that you've overcome, Allison, to you, what have you experienced in your career?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's so interesting that we all have similar responses, which I think is self-doubt and imposter syndrome. So it's not interesting or new, but I think it's representative of the fact that we all kind of feel that. So I've often questioned, you know, am I good enough to be in the room? Am I good enough to be here? When are they going to find me out that I don't deserve to be in this room? And so I think what we can all take away from that is that we all feel it, and it's natural. It's very, very normal to feel that. So you're not alone in that feeling. And there's lots of things we can do to overcome that, you know, recognizing that we got the job because we deserve to be here. We are supported by our leaders, and seeking out other women. I think as a mayor probably could have done earlier to help me overcome that and not felt so isolated in that feeling.
Fantastic. Emma?
Yeah, I think both what Ali and Wendy said is really critical. And I think it is also like the judgment factor. Not only that you're judging yourself, but it's comments. It's small little comments that kind of fuel that imposter inside of you even more. Like, and this could be like really basic things like, you know, you're leaving early to pick up your kids and, you know, somebody makes a remark around this. Or even if you're not a parent, it could be as simple as, there's, you know, a birthday card to be organized, and everybody kind of looks over at the woman to do the job. It's just these like this typical female and male jobs. And, you know, the female jobs always seem to be the ones that are, you know, of less value and more around the organizational aspects. And as a woman, you can really like, I've really felt like reduced, where I'm like, if you push back, you sometimes then kind of like get judged as, oh, like she's being very, sorry, I don't know if we can say that, but bitchy, or something like this. If you're trying to, you know, stand your ground, while if men would do the same, they wouldn't be judged in the same kind of manner. And I think that kind of judgment can be subtle sometimes, but it's very, very crystal clear to the individual receiving it. And I think we all need to hold ourselves more accountable of how we can, stop transmitting this kind of like unconscious judgment sometimes as well.
Brilliant.
I think, oh, sorry, Jace, I was just going to say,
cool.
I think on those little comments thing, I think the imposter syndrome feeds into that though, because I think sometimes we read stuff into comments that people don't mean anything by it, but because of that little self-doubt in the back of our heads, we're going, well, did they mean this by it, or are they thinking that about me? And it almost spirals into something that they hadn't intended because of that imposter syndrome.
One of the things I've noticed that there's a very broad mixed audience on this event, which is fantastic. And I wonder what are the factors that you would look for in the right environment as a workplace that is supportive of you. So I would like to think that you're in places now that are supporting you. What is that company doing for you as a woman or just as an individual that you believe is getting the best out of you? Who would like to take that first? Emma, go on.
Yes, and I really want to do a huge and massive shout out to my manager Ricardo, because there isn't a single team meeting. Like, he really annoyingly focuses on making sure that when we say guys in a team meeting, when he says like, hey guys, that he calls people out on it and says, guys, excuse me, I think we have a healthy balance here on the team. And it's just like small little things that he would say, or just checking in with people. So he'll check in regularly to kind of like understand where people are like emotionally as well. But it's like these, to have the support of your manager driving this as well. I think that's really, really important. And another area is, even from a HR perspective, like when it comes to paternity or maternity leave, I experienced that where my partner wanted to go on paternity leave and he was then asked. So it's not only directed at women, so it's directed at men, where men need to feel empowered through their employers, being able to take paternity leave and not being judged by not being the primary carer, because they might be. And it's just these small little things where even men then kind of go, oh, can I even take that time off? Because I'm not the primary, or I'm not seen as a primary carer. So I think if we can start, removing this, and that's already going to be a huge help.
Good advice. Allison?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways you can look at it. The first thing would be externally. Let's say you're going into a new role, want to interview at a new company. I would look at, are there women in leadership on LinkedIn? What does representation of women look like? Are there women in senior positions where you feel like you could advance your career there? Or are there going to be women that you're going to be able to speak to about what it's like to work there? I would also look at their benefits. So you'll be able to see pretty quickly if they're interested in investing in women in their careers by seeing if they have good maternity, paternity benefits. Also things like egg freezing, adoption, those types of options that are not necessarily that are available or that should be made available to anyone who wants to start a family, right? So that they're inclusive. And then I think once you start getting into interviews, prioritize questions that are going to help you understand if it's a good fit for you. How do they promote women? How do you handle internal feedback? You'll get a good gut feel. I think women just have a really good intuition, and you should really trust your gut once you start having conversations with people and see how you sort of react to how they make you feel. Those are just some of the signals I would look at.
Brilliant. Wendy?
Yeah, I think it's, like you say, having conversations, looking at who is in the leadership team, the breakdown of that. What does that look like? Do they look like they support women? I think from experience and from friends' experiences, I've seen kind of companies that externally appear to have great, policies that support women, that are family friendly and are, have great maternity leaves or shared parental leaves. But then when it comes to actually seeing it through, whilst they do what they have to do for the, compared to the policy, the actual kind of culture of the organization doesn't fit with that. So when, people come back from maternity leave, there's this kind of attitude, like you say, of, oh, she's leaving early because she's got to go and pick her kid up from daycare or nursery or whatever, and that sort of thing that doesn't fit with that policy. And I've also seen, experienced it myself, where, maternity leave has been kind of statutory pay. So you'd almost look at it and go, oh, it's not particularly family friendly because it's just statutory. But on return was, falling out. What can we do to help you come back? What do you need from us? And so it's not just looking at the policies, it's looking at the culture around it. And Connor's just made a really good point in the comments about managers playing a part in culture, but everyone being a culture carrier and creating that culture. So if you're looking for a new role, or you're looking, to change jobs and in a new organization, then one of the things that I think is really good to do is search out people who are in your role or the role that you're looking for on LinkedIn, and talk to them, engage in a conversation about what they really think about where they work, and see if you can get a feel for the culture from that perspective. Great,
good points. I think very helpful. There's a lot of worry and anxiety that happens when you're moving roles, because there's uncertainty, and we're all nervous around uncertainty. So to have those points around what you should look out for as a woman in an organization, really helpful. One of the questions I was thinking about was, what has been your greatest achievement in your career, and why do you think you've been successful at achieving that achievement in the way that you have? What I want to do is put a spotlight on the way that you've been successful, so others can be inspired from your experience. So do you have a great achievement or a series of achievements that you're proud of, and why do you think you were enabled to be successful with those achievements?
I'm happy to take that one first. So I don't see my achievements in sales. Like I see them, I've got like singular achievements where I've closed this deal or that deal, and it's the biggest deal for this or the biggest deal for that. But actually I see my biggest achievement in sales as the development of my SDRs. So helping SDRs move from that SDR role through to whatever role it is they're looking for, whether it's SDR manager, whether it's AE, SMB or mid-market A, but helping them progress. And I see that as my biggest achievement, because it's helping pass that baton on and helping people develop their careers. Hi.
We've got a future women leader in the house. What's her name, Emma?
Her name's Kira, and she is an extremely tough negotiator. So there's a sales career in this one for sure.
Welcome to the stage. I love that. Wendy?
No, that was it. That was it. My greatest achievement is kind of helping SDRs progress, I think, and seeing them fly when they get to be AEs. It's brilliant.
Brilliant. Allison?
That's such a good one, Wendy. I love that. I have a couple of good, I think, achievements that are special because I had great support or sponsorship from the companies I was at the time. So one of them is that I closed the longest deal in sort of the company history. It was a 4-year deal, a 6-figure deal that we stole away from a competitor. So like just a great cycle, a deal where I grew a lot in terms of my skills. And the manager I had at the time, his name was Scott, like really, really believed in me, took me under his wing. And that type of support in male dominated teams means so much to kind of building up your confidence. And then I think also getting the opportunity to move overseas and work in a new team in a new market is an achievement that I'm really, really proud of. It was obviously a challenge, coming to a new country, learning how to sell in a new culture and a different environment, but something I'm proud of also because that business kind of believed in sending me on the mission.
So would you encourage people to take the opportunity to move location, move country, and experience new adventures?
Yeah, if it makes sense for them, right? It's obviously a super personal decision, so I couldn't say blanket, advice for anyone. But if you are young enough and you want to, it's pushed me to become a much better seller. It's pushed me to become more independent, and so it's something I'm really, really proud of. So if your company offers that and it's something you want to try, I would say absolutely go for it.
Brilliant. Emma, what about you? Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I've kind of been thinking long about it, and I don't really want to say that there's like one specific thing that I've achieved in my career. I think there's so much more that I can achieve, that I don't feel like I'm really there where I can say I've achieved all of this. But I think it's building that resilience, and as much as we are successful in sales, we are often faced with a lot of failure and rejection. And I think it's being able to build that resilience and that support network, either through mentors, coaches, friends, who are there for you and who help you transition through this. I think that's one of my biggest achievements, where I'm at a point where I don't look as critical at me anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great. One of the questions that's just come in through that I'm going to open up. I'd like one of you to ask a question in a moment, but We just had this question from Julia that says, how do you see women in sales benefiting or differing from a hybrid or even remote cultures? Do you think women in sales have benefited from the remote culture? Who would like to take that? I see thumbs up from Emma. Go on.
Yes, I cannot express in words how much COVID has helped me finally reach that point where I can have that remote flexibility. I love going to the office and I love connecting with people there, but I've got 2 kids and it's an hour commute each way, and it's just not possible. It's 2 hours I lose in a day, and having that flexibility to be able to be there, or even drop the kids into school, it's just it's fantastic. Being a mom and working on sales, it's incredible. And if there was one silver lining from COVID, that's it for me.
Great. Wendy?
Yeah, I'd say something similar. So I've actually been fortunate to work from home 2 or 3 days a week for the last sort of 6, 7, 8 years. So COVID didn't accelerate that for me particularly. I've been really fortunate to do that. But yeah, I would say the hybrid nature, allowing me to do things like school drop-offs and pickups occasionally when I needed to. I have a slightly different situation to lots of people. So my husband is a stay-at-home dad, so he does most of the school pickups and drop-offs. But I also have like an 1.5 to 2 hour commute each way when I come into the office, which I love doing. I do it twice a week and it's brilliant because I get to see people and I get time on my own on the commute and stuff. But it also means that on those days I leave the house before the children are awake and don't get home until probably half an hour, 45 minutes before they go to bed. So it means that the days that I am at home, I get to spend more time with them and help them with homework and reading and things. But it also helps me with focus. So when I'm in the office, naturally as salespeople, I think lots of us are quite extroverted or extroverted introverts, I think I am. But the office environment is very chatty and it's sociable and it's easy to get caught up kind of having those conversations with people. Whereas when I'm at home, I probably work slightly longer hours because I'm not doing the commute, and B, I'm more focused because I can sit and focus and I don't have people popping by my desk every 10 minutes to ask me a question. So I would say that's probably a benefit for everybody, not just women in sales. But then I also know lots of people prefer working in the office. And I think the hybrid nature of it just means that it's better for everybody because everybody can work in a way that suits them.
Great. Allison?
That's great feedback. I'm not a mom, so I don't know if it's benefited me in the exact same ways. But I think it's done 2 things. First of all, it's sort of highlighted the differences in largely how often women are taking on more domestic responsibilities than their male partners. So my husband and I are working during lockdown, both working at home together, and it really sort of highlighted how much more of the burden I was taking on in terms of laundry, cleaning, cooking, and it's leveled things out for us, which has been really nice. So it sort of exposed that. So people might have sort of experienced that as well. So it's definitely been a benefit in that way. And the second is I'm actually pretty introverted naturally, and I get really drained being in social situations quite a lot or by a commute. And I notice that those types of days, even now when I am in the office and I love doing it, and it's amazing to see people, I get sort of my energy is zapped quite quickly. So I get to focus more, I get to be on my own, I get to recharge, I get to work out and sleep and go for walks and do all those things that kind of help balance me out and keep my mental health really, really healthy.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Is there a question from one of you that you would like to ask each other that's top of mind?
I've got a few. I don't know if anyone else does. I'm curious, as we've all sort of been in sales for several years now, what would each of you tell your younger selves, knowing what you know now about being a woman in sales?
Oh, that's a really good question. I tell myself to care less what other people think, and that's probably a general about my life, not just about women in being a woman in sales. But yeah, I think when I was younger I cared too much about what other people thought about me, and I cared too much about how being liked by customers. And I think it's something lots of salespeople have, again, not just women, men have it too. But what someone I read in a psychology book the other week was called the disease to please. So, and I think it held me back when I was younger in so many ways, because I was less focused on what I needed and what would work from a sales perspective, and more about pleasing the customer and not being their friend, but because that isn't the relationship you have, but almost wanting to be liked by them. And as I've got older, I've realized that I don't need them to like me. That doesn't, you know, likability is important, but it's not the be all and end all. And I don't need to worry about what other people think about me in the same way that I did when I was younger.
Absolutely. Emma, what do you think?
Yeah, it's actually scary, Wendy, how much we are alike. I really like, I'm like, hey, this is me. But one thing that I did 12 months ago, and honestly, I was a totally different person 12 months ago. It's actually like I'm shocked sometimes what happened in that transition, and that's when I took up coaching with one of my connections, and she focuses on strengths-based coaching. So I was not able to talk about what my strengths are. And what I was really good at. So, you know, we all say like, oh, I'm very bad at organizing, or I'm bad at this. But somebody asks you, what are you really good at? You're like, oh, I don't know. And through this kind of like 12-month journey, I've identified what my core strengths are, how I can utilize them to put myself into situations that make me more successful because I naturally am good at these things, but also that create much bigger opportunities for me to shine from a professional, but also from a personal perspective. And if I could tell my younger self to do one thing, then that's figure out what your strengths are and start, bringing yourself into situations where you can use them, because it's a force multiplier.
That's great advice. I can definitely relate to both of you. Wendy, I had that. I used to be super insecure and really try and just please everybody and be a people pleaser. And it never really benefited me, right? So I think just knowing that you're showing up and being good enough and reminding yourself that you don't have to compare yourself to anyone, that doesn't really get us anywhere, right? We see a little sliver of each other online, but there's a lot more that we're not really seeing. And Emma, I think that's so important as well, especially as women in sales. Show up, know what you're good at, and lean into situations where your strengths are and not where your weaknesses are, right? So we're not going to be good at everything, but if you put yourselves in the right situations, you'll succeed.
I have a question for you guys as well. Ali, you can go first on this one. If you could give one piece of advice to the men that you work with about how to be a better ally for women, what would it be?
Such a good one. And I think that's so important. I think some of the burden definitely has to be on women to educate men, but I think men now and going forward need to be hyper vigilant if they really want to see diversity and inclusion and good representation on their sales team. So I would say just pay attention and ask questions. It's often, as Fran was saying before, it's difficult for us to feel like we should speak up in male-dominated spaces. So go out of your way to accommodate women in your spaces, ask them what motivates them, ask them about their goals and their questions, and then find opportunities to sponsor them.
Emma, do you have one piece of advice?
I guess just start to focus more on how we communicate with one another. I think it applies to both men and women, but particularly men, since in a lot of companies, they do demonstrate, the larger share of employees in B2B SaaS sales, typically. So having, strong allies that kind of support your voice, I think is really, really critical. But I'm actually generally curious in the two organizations that you work for, do you have active communities, sub-communities within where men also support you? I'm just curious how other companies are doing that, and what can be done even.
Yeah, I think we do. We have memberships to different women in tech forums and things like that. But also, I feel like it's a safe space to talk about. And I know that there are men that I could go and talk to and say, I'm having this issue, or I'm having, this is happening. I think my one piece of advice for males to help them be better allies would be about advocating. So there are still spaces and there are still places that women cannot get into, and their voices aren't being heard. And I think it's about advocating for women when they're not in the room. So not just when women are there and talking about them, but also when they're not in the room. And also for salespeople more generally, sales is a team game, right? We're not, if we work for the same company, we're not in competition with each other. So making sure that you are looking out for the people around you, whether they be men, women, or non-binary, whatever it is, making sure that we're taking care of each other and advocating for each other when we're not in the room.
I love that. We've just run over time, so I'm going to call it to a close, but I just want to thank you for your honesty and your openness. I think it's been a breath of fresh air for me to hear so much transparency on how you feel about your roles and your experiences. And it's given me enough confidence that we should be doing this regularly to advocate for women in the sales profession. So we're now going to go into the networking, so I can still see there's plenty of you online, and I'm sure you'd want to speak individually and privately to the speakers. So what we're going to do now, I'm just going to thank everybody. I'm just bringing all the speakers up and just to say thank you for your contributions today. I really appreciate it, and really appreciate the enthusiasm. The chat has been off the charts, so thank you for that. I think this is a good example, and make sure you tell your friends and others about this event so that we can get more people coming. And also, if you feel that you should be on the panel discussion and want to contribute in the future, do let me know. So the networking, there's a tab which is basically called People, which is, I think, on the left of your screens for the attendees, and then speakers if you go to that link that I shared with you in the private chat. So I'm going to end the broadcast now from the discussion point of view. I want to thank everybody for putting the time and effort to come and learn from these wonderful leaders and thought leaders in this space. And now let's enjoy the networking. And once again, thank you very much for your contributions.